Hi, Chloe. This is your fairy godmother. I know just how much you love bedtime stories, so here I am again with another story just for you. Today's story is called Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm. There were once a man and a woman who lived together but didn't have a child. They very much wanted to have a child. And these people had a little window at the back of their house where they could see a wonderful garden. And the garden was full of the most beautiful flowers and plants. It was, though, surrounded by a very high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress. The enchantress had great power, but was dreaded by all the world because she wasn't a very nice enchantress. One day, the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed of the most beautiful rampion. And it looked so fresh and green that she really wanted to eat it. And this desire of wanting to eat the rampion grew and grew and grew. And she knew that if she could not eat any of it, she would be so sad, and every day she would feel more and more miserable. And her husband one day noticed that she was very sad and asked, "What's wrong, my dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't get some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind our house, to eat, I shall die." The man, who loved her very much, thought, "Oh, I couldn't let my wife die. Maybe I will just try to go into the garden and get some rampion. I'm sure it will be okay." And so, in the evening that night, the man climbed over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, and he quickly got a handful of rampion from the ground and took it to his wife. And the wife was so happy, and she made herself a salad out of it and ate it all up. And she was very delighted. But she liked it so much that the next day she asked her husband to get more. And so again, her husband that night climbed over the wall into the garden. But when he was climbing down the wall, he was terribly afraid because he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How dare you," she said with an angry look, "to come to my garden and steal my rampion like a thief?" "Oh," the husband cried, "oh, please, I only did it because my wife saw your rampion from the window and it was so beautiful that she really wanted one." "My wife says if she doesn't eat any of this rampion, she'll die." The enchantress, upon hearing this, said, "Oh, well, in that case, I will let you take away as much rampion as you want, but only under one condition. You must give me the first child that your wife will bring into the world, and I will care for it like a mother." The man was so scared that he said yes to everything. And so the next year, when the women had a baby, the enchantress appeared and took the child away and named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful girl, and when she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a high tower, and the tower was in a deep, dark forest. And the tower had no stairs or any doors. There was only a little window at the very top. And when the enchantress wanted to go in, she would place herself beneath the tower and say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair. And when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she would let down her braid from the window and let the enchantress climb up by her hair. After a year or two, one day, the king's son was riding a horse through the forest and he went by the tower. Then he heard a beautiful song which was sung by Rapunzel. And so the prince stood under the tower and listened to Rapunzel's beautiful, sweet voice. The prince wanted to climb up to her, and he tried to look for the door around the tower, but he couldn't find any. And so he rode his horse home. But Rapunzel's singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to the song. Once he was standing behind a tree. He saw the enchantress came, and he heard how she said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And he saw Rapunzel let down her beautiful long braid to let the enchantress climb up. So the prince thought to himself, that's the ladder by which I must go up. And so the next day, when it began to grow dark, he also went to the tower and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And immediately the hair fell down, and then the prince climbed up. And when Rapunzel saw him, she was terribly frightened because she had never seen a man before. But the king's son, the prince, began to talk to her like a friend, and he was very kind and very gentle. And so Rapunzel was not afraid of him anymore. The prince wanted to take Rapunzel away and marry her, and Rapunzel was very happy to go away with him. But she said, "I would be very happy to go with you, but I don't know how to get down. Maybe every day when you come around, bring a little bit of silk with you, and I will weave a ladder out of it. And when it's ready, then I can climb down from the silk." And so they agreed that until Rapunzel could weave a ladder out of the silk, he would come to her every day and they would spend every night together. Until one day, the enchantress found out that the prince had a plan to take Rapunzel away, and she was furious. "If you're not going to stay here with me, then you will not be allowed to be with the prince either." The wicked enchantress took a pair of scissors and snip, snap, cut off Rapunzel's beautiful hair. Rapunzel was so sad, but before she had time to be sad, the enchantress took poor Rapunzel into a desert, where she could not get back, and she had to live all by herself with great grief and misery. On that night, when the prince came and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," and the enchantress threw down Rapunzel's hair for the prince to climb up. And when the prince climbed up to the top, Rapunzel was not there. Instead, it was the enchantress, who looked at him with a venomous look. "Aha!" she said mockingly. "Your most beautiful Rapunzel is no longer singing here. She is out in the desert all by herself, lost forever. Ha 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 ha." And after that, the enchantress pushed the young prince out the window, and the prince fell from the top of the tower. He escaped, though. He didn't die, but he fell into the bushes with some thorns, and the thorns pierced his eyes. And so now he was blind, walking around the forest, and he ate nothing but roots and berries. But even though he could not see, he didn't give up on looking for Rapunzel. He walked around in misery for many years, and at last he arrived at the desert where Rapunzel was. Rapunzel had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl, and was living together with them in the desert. And the prince heard some children's voice, and he started to follow the voice. And then he heard a beautiful woman's singing voice that was so familiar to him. And he was walking closer and closer, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew that it was the prince, and she ran to him and hugged him and cried, for they had missed each other so much. And 2 of her tears went from Rapunzel's eyes into the prince's eyes. And all of a sudden, the prince's eyes grew clear again. He could see with them as before. Rapunzel's tears had saved the prince. And so the prince led Rapunzel and his children back to his kingdom, where he was very joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, and laughter filled their lives every day. That's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed that one, Chloe. Now it's time to say goodnight. I hope you have a wonderful sleep. Bye.